A cherished family at the center of a small town.
They laughed and they joked around and they were happy together. They were loved and well respected in our community.
Is gunned down in cold blood.
I'll never forget walking in the house that morning and seeing what I saw. Who could have done this? Was it somebody that they knew? Maybe this person had sought some type of revenge.
Detectives pursue a trail of suspects.
He was actually set to gain from the death.
And then his behavior was alarming.
During the polygraph, he started tearing the stuff off. I know they had had issues within their relationship.
They said, well, I can take care of that problem for the right sum of money.
But the killer remains elusive.
What are we missing? What are we not doing?
Until a shocking confession reveals the true culprit.
And she agreed to wear a recording device and elicit some more information. I mean, it was just incredible. It was disturbing.
The killer was about the most unexpected thing. It was such a shock.
Columbia, Kentucky is a small but tight-knit rural community.
Everyone knows everyone else. Your neighbors feel like family. People watch out for one another.
Not uncommon. You'd be walking downtown, you'll stop, run into friends or family. Very friendly atmosphere.
One of the most beloved families in Columbia are the Wellnitzes. They own a veterinary clinic just steps away from their home.
I just remember that environment at the clinic was a place that I, as a kid, wanted to spend every spare moment that I had, just because it was a great place to be. Joe and Beth, their kids, Dennis and Meg, they were kind, they were loving, and they were fun to be around.
On February 26, 1993, the town forever changes after two of Joe and Beth's employees make a grim discovery just after 8 a.m. at the Wellnitz home.
2 employees had shown up for work, but Joe and Beth were not at the clinic. The clinic was adjacent to the residence. So the gentleman walked over to the house, went in the back door, and discovered Joe's body in the downstairs area of the home. The lady that had also shown up for work that morning, she then went to the house, discovered 2 bodies upstairs.
Joe and Beth and their son, Dennis, they've been shot. Then she ran out and called the police.
Investigators rushed to the scene.
I'll never forget walking in the house that morning and seeing what I saw. It was just total shock. I knew what kind of people they were. I knew how kind they were and how compassionate they were with their work that they did. I couldn't believe it. When we entered the house, there was Joe laying there on the floor. He was on his stomach. His hand was underneath his chest.
He had a pair of gray sweatpants on and a white t-shirt. It looked like he came out of a bathroom and had been shot and fell face first. Blood that had pooled around the body.
My initial reaction was shock. But then I realized shortly thereafter that I had a job to do, and my job was to take care of the scene, to see if we could find out who did this horrible thing. Around the scene where Joe was found, there was multiple shell casings, and you could see bullet holes in the walls. We went from there to the upstairs, and we found Dennis's body laying there in his bedroom. He had no shirt on. You could see bullet holes in his back. There was also shell casings laying around. Looked like he was crawling on the floor and was executed by the killer at that point. Entering into the back bedroom that belonged to Joe and Beth, you could see multiple shell casings back there.
Beth was found on the side of the bed nearest to the doorway. She appeared to have been standing when she was shot, with multiple gunshot wounds to her head and upper torso. The Wellnitzes were all found either in or near a bed or in clothes that suggested they had been sleeping. So it was apparent that it had happened during the night at some point or early morning hours.
After examining the bodies, police scour the rest of the house for clues, but there's no sign of a murder weapon.
There were no broken windows, there was no furniture turned over, the house had not been ransacked. It was significant that there was no forced entry, that at least gave the impression that it was somebody with some degree of familiarity with the home and with the Wellness family. It appeared this family had been targeted.
Who could have done this? You know, who is the person that would have done such a horrible crime in this community that is usually so gentle? Was it somebody that they knew? Maybe this person had sought some type of revenge. Once we saw that these three people had been murdered, we immediately wanted to know, where is Meg Wellness at, so we can find her to make sure she's safe, first of all, make sure she's not a victim. We were able to locate her. She was at school in Lexington and was unharmed.
Officers are tasked with breaking the news to Joe and Beth's daughter.
Meg was told that her mom and dad and brother were murdered, were dead. I really felt sorry for her. I thought, now how is she going to go on? You know, how did she recover from this?
We got a phone call just a little while after I got up, and they said, Beth and Joe have been killed. And at that moment, we didn't know Dennis also had been killed. And I just stayed in my room that day and just cried. Just couldn't believe that they were gone. They were like a second set of parents for me.
One of my family members had called. They gave me the horrible news that Joe and Beth and Dennis had all been murdered. And that's a day you don't forget.
Joe Wellnitz was born in 1942 and grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. From a young age, he always loved animals and turned that passion into a career.
Not many rural communities anywhere would have been able to boast of having a veterinarian with the background that Joe had. Joe was one of the most caring, kindest gentlemen that you will ever meet.
In his 30s, Joe met Beth Preston, a woman 10 years his junior. Both divorced, they married in 1979, and Joe adopted her 2 kids, Dennis and Meg. 2 years later, they moved their family and Joe's clinic from Lexington to Columbia.
Meg would come in and out of the clinic. Dennis would I would just see him outside. He was only 20 years old.
Dennis was popular in school. He had worked in town. He had attended college. He was just a well-liked young man.
Beth was the one I was closest to. She was the face of the clinic. She was the person everyone saw when they walked in the door. Always had a smile on her face. The relationship between Joe and Beth was perfect to me. They laughed and they joked around and they were happy together. They were a very happy family.
But one horrific night has changed everything. Who could have wanted to kill the Wellnitzes, and why?
The 2 employees that discovered the bodies were certainly interviewed that morning. There was really no motive, and the way the 2 of them arrived that morning, there was really no opportunity for either of them to commit the murders. They were dismissed as suspects.
In Lexington, police ask Meg to help them piece together her family's last movements. She says she visited them for dinner 2 days ago, but had returned that night as she had school.
Meg told the police that she'd been in Lexington the night before the bodies were found, and that she'd been playing cards with some friends, her boyfriend, as well as another couple, Bill Meese, and then Bill Meese's wife.
When asked if Meg was aware of any problems at home, she gives police their first lead.
There was a couple that were tenants of Joe and Bess. They may have had issues with, and their names Brenda and Dave Cowell.
The Cowells had been living in a cabin on the Wellnitz property.
They were living there rent-free, exchanged for doing some work for Joe and Beth. There was some discrepancy there about whether they were doing the work sufficiently or not. Joe and Beth felt like they weren't, so they gave them a bill for $1,800 for the rent. And ultimately, they never paid it. They filed bankruptcy.
Were the Cowells angry enough to want the Wellnitzes dead? Was this murder payback?
They were persons of interest, people that we needed to talk to. We needed to prove or disprove whether they were involved in it or not.
Coming up, fear races through the community.
We thought if this could happen to the Wellnitzes, it could happen to any of us. Who would be next? People were scared. Everybody wanted to know who did it, why they did it, and how they did it.
Everybody was just guessing, gossiping.
And police unearthed family secrets, indicating a potential motive.
It was a surprise to me to learn that there was another child involved. There was actually a will giving him so much money out of the estate.
Before a shocking confession.
I walked through the house, I engaged and fired on him. I emptied the magazine of weapons.
Reveals a killer no one could have imagined.
It was a bombshell.
Police investigating the homicide of Joe, Beth, and Dennis Wellnitz have their first suspects. Tenants who had recently clashed with the family over money.
When we learned about the bankruptcy, about them living on the property, this discrepancy about the work they were doing, whether it was sufficient or not, especially when it came to the money, and then this bill for $1,800, we thought, well, this could be a motive for them wanting to do something. We knew that we had to talk to them. We had to see if they were involved.
Police learned the Cowles no longer live on the Wellnitz property. Maybe
they left there disgruntled. We went on that theory. Maybe they had went to the Wellnitz house that morning and then got into it with them, and then that's when all this escalated from there.
While detectives tracked down the Cowles, officers canvassed the area for witnesses.
We did a neighborhood canvass to talk to people to see if anybody in that area had heard anything, seen anything, or had any other information that they could provide. We were not able to identify anybody that did hear anything that went on that night during the shooting or anything.
4 days after the murder, detectives locate the Cowles and bring them in for separate interviews. Brenda claims she didn't hold any grudge against the Wellnitzes.
She told us that even though they had not paid the money that Joe and Beth felt like they owed, they had worked out the discrepancy and everything had moved on from that.
Police asked Brenda where she was the night of the murder.
They ended up moving off the farm. She said she was not there. She was at home when it happened.
When detectives speak with Brenda's husband, Dave, he's unable to confirm her alibi because of his own.
Dave was working in Louisville, Kentucky, which is almost in Indiana, probably 100 miles from where this happened at. He adamantly denied any involvement in this. He didn't want it to do harm to them.
Investigators speak to friends of the Wellnitzes to confirm the dispute with the Cowles had been resolved.
We were talking to friends in that area. We were able to determine that situation where those hard feelings had been resolved a long time prior to this happening. They were ruled out as far as having anything to do with this murder.
With no arrests made, fear begins to grip the town.
We thought if this could happen to the Wellnitzes, it could happen to any of us. It could happen to anyone. They were loved and well respected in our community, and so if they could be killed, who would be next? People were scared. Everybody wanted to know who did it, why they did it, and how they did it.
Word travels fast. Everybody was expressing their opinion as to what may or may not have contributed to this. But everybody was just guessing, gossiping.
It's got the whole community in an uproar about what happened. We had to get some answers pretty quickly, make sure that it wasn't some random killing and that other people may be coming next. When we started thinking about who could have done this, we started thinking about the veterinarian business. People get very sensitive about their pets, so we thought, well, maybe somebody had gotten disgruntled over that. We learned from the employees there that there was an issue between Jerry Yarberry and the Wellnesses, where he had brought in his dog to have treatment done to its eye, and the dog ultimately was blind. So we thought, well, maybe this might be a motive for somebody to do harm to them. Some of the key questions that we wanted to know from Jerry was, how did he feel now toward the Wellnesses, and how did he feel toward what had happened between them?
Police bring Jerry into the station for questioning.
He told us that he was very upset about his pet. He refused to pay the bill that was owed to the Wellnesses. They ended up having to file a lawsuit against him in order to recoup the funds.
While Jerry admits he was angry with Joe, he says he isn't a killer.
He adamantly denied doing anything to the Wellnesses as far as going to that extreme. When we talked to Jerry, we learned that he was home watching TV with his wife and kids, and we were able to confirm that that's where he was at, and therefore we were able to eliminate him as a suspect in this case.
There's frustration on the part of the police because they want to see a crime solved. They want to see a murderer, in this case, held accountable. They want to see that person punished. And then there's frustration because we don't know if justice is ever going to be served.
As the case threatens to stall, a friend of the Wellnitz family contacts police with pertinent information.
I said, I'm a real estate broker, and our getting the property ready to sell, there was an indenture, kind of a rectangle, in the floor of that master bedroom closet. I knew for a fact Joe and them kept a floor safe upstairs in their bedroom in the closet. I'm assuming, but that's where he kept all these important papers, his deed, anything that was of significance.
Gives you the opinion that the safe was part of the plan all along, that the killer knew where that safe was at. It was not sitting out in the open where you would commit these 3 murders and then say, okay, there's a safe, I'm gonna take that with me. It was hidden back in a closet.
It certainly caused the officers to focus their attention on who would want that safe, who would know the safe was there, and who would stand to have some benefit from removing the safe, especially in light of the fact that nothing else was taken, nothing else was disturbed.
If we could locate that safe, and very easily, that's going to put us on the trail of whoever.
Getting the first triple homicide in Columbia, Kentucky, are searching for an object stolen from the scene they hope will lead them to the killer.
The missing fire safe was certainly a critical piece of evidence that the officers were investigating. They tried to determine more specifically what the contents of the safe were, what was in there, what was going to perhaps turn up that might then be a clue.
In talking to the family, we were able to learn that there was possibly could be insurance papers in that safe, maybe even up to around $1,000.
In this case, the only motive was to either cause the death of the Wellnitz family or to take the safe out.
As detectives put out an APB for the safe, the autopsy results come in.
One of the crucial things that we need to know is the time of death.
As far as the time frame of the death, the internal examination of the bodies was consistent that they had been killed within a few hours prior to the bodies being discovered.
It's estimated Joe, Beth, and Dennis were murdered around 4 a.m.
The medical examiner was able to determine that each victim died as a result of multiple gunshot wounds.
None of the victims had defense marks on their bodies, meaning they had likely been taken by surprise.
Additional projectiles were recovered from the bodies during the autopsy. The firearms examiner did determine that all of the shots were fired from a 9mm handgun. It did seem likely that they were all fired by the same person, given the fact that they were all fired from the same gun.
Obviously, from there, we're going to start doing multiple interviews to try to eliminate or show who has killed these 3 people, who could have that much of a grudge against them. During our investigation, we were able to learn that Joe had another son by the name of Eric. From my previous personal experience with Joe and Beth, I didn't know about Eric until after the murder. Joe had adopted him, much the way that he did with Meg and Dennis, and then that marriage broke apart. It was a surprise to me to learn that there was another child involved that Joe had adopted at a young age. We started receiving information, documentation showing that Eric was actually still set to gain from the death of Joe. There was actually a will giving him so much money out of the estate to the tune of $250,000. Eric was somebody that we needed to talk to because that much money obviously would be a motive for somebody to do something like this.
Police tracked the 19-year-old down at his home in Lexington.
When Eric was interviewed, he was shocked that it occurred. They had issues within their relationship, him and Joe. It was a very distant relationship and then non-existent after a while. Eric also indicated that he felt like he was replaced by Dennis. They had completely become estranged after so long and had stopped any contact with each other. One of the things that we learned was that Eric did resent Joe. Part of that resentment was because of this estrangement.
Had Eric settled a score and inherited a fortune by killing the family? When police question him about the will, they are taken aback by his response.
When he learned that he was a beneficiary to this will, he was actually surprised that he was included in it, because of they've been estranged for that many years.
But detectives can't just take Eric at his word.
The motive is there, the possibility, so we needed to know whether he had any type of alibi that we could substantiate to make sure that he wasn't in Columbia that morning. We learned during our interview with Eric Wellness that he had worked that night, and then once he got off work, he went to a friend's house and slept at that friend's house.
Eric says he was in Lexington the entire night, 2 hours away from Columbia.
So we were able to talk to that friend and determine that he did not have the opportunity to commit this crime. We felt pretty certain that he was not a suspect at this point. We eliminated him and moved on.
I was shocked, and it was an odd situation being questioned by the police officers. The fact that I was named in the will, if that was something that I had known, then that for sure gives me a motive. But there's no way in the world I could have ever done anything like that. Yes, I was angry as a child, having your dad disappearing out of your life, kind of in a snap of a finger. It was hard, and I was angry, but not that kind of anger where I wished anything bad.
Detectives learn that Meg, the only other surviving member of the family, is also named in the will. Could she have anything to do with the murder?
I really felt bad for Meg at that time because I knew Meg, but we had to get some answers. When we approached her about the will, she didn't know about it. She also wanted answers, She loved them, Joe and Beth and Dennis.
She was so bright and intelligent and loving.
Police ask Meg about her relationship with her parents. She says it was good, but she raises one concern.
Officers did learn that Beth and Meg had some disagreements over some of the people that she was now spending a lot of time with.
One person in particular, Meg's boyfriend, Randy Appleton.
Beth and Joe didn't want him around, so we needed to talk to Randy. Randy became a viable person of interest.
After 3 members of the Wellnitz family are gunned down in their own home, police now have a new suspect, the boyfriend of surviving daughter Meg, 20-year-old Randy Appleton.
Joe didn't go into any details, but he had a concern, I think, of the direction that Meg had taken as far as who she was associating with.
That could be a motive for Randy Appleton.
Detectives asked Randy where he was the night of the murder.
He was leery about talking to us.
Randy tells police he was playing cards with Meg and her friends until 2 a.m. the night of the murder. Then he mentions something that grabs detectives' attention.
We learned that he was interested in firearms. We had learned that he had frequented a firing range.
If the murder weapon had been used at the same firing range where he in fact acknowledged having been practicing with a 9mm, would be a very critical part of the investigation if those shell casings collected from the range matched the murder weapon that was believed to have been used to kill the Wellnitz family.
We're starting to see red flags at this point. Randy was one that liked guns. He did like to go to that firing range and did use a weapon there. We actually ended up going to the firing range and collecting several spent shell casings. All of them were submitted to the crime lab. Our hope was that we could match those rounds through the laboratory to some of the 9mm shell casings that we had located.
2 weeks later, police received the results on the shell casings.
They were not able to find any casings that matched as having been fired from the murder weapon that was used to kill the Wellens family.
It was very disappointing that we were unable to tie any of those shell casings to Randy Appleton.
It suggested either that they used a different weapon at the firing range than was used to murder the family, or that it could have been somebody else.
Despite the setback, Randy's love of guns and familiarity with the Wellnitz home means he is still a suspect. Police look to confirm his alibi with those he and Meg claim to have been with the night of the murder, Bill and Regina Meese.
We had to talk to them to see if that was what they were doing, playing cards during the early morning hours, because that was Randy's alibi. Bill was cooperative, where Bill had agreed to talk to us about certain things.
Bill corroborates Randy's alibi.
They were all four together playing cards till the early morning hours. He agreed to take a lie detector test. During the process of the polygraph examiner asked him if he knew anything about what happened, if he had any involvement about what happened.
And then his behavior was something that was alarming. It was something that caused some concern with the officers.
He started tearing the stuff off that you put on during a polygraph and just shut it down right then. And then the polygraph was over at that point. So he did not complete the polygraph. He was just very mad. Definitely raised red flags with us that he knows more than he's telling us, and that he's afraid of that polygraph because that polygraph might tell us more than he wants us to know.
Despite his behavior, police have nothing concrete on Bill and are forced to let him go.
We tried to talk to Regina, but Bill did not want us to interview her. He was very controlling with her. It's over at this point. We were still running down leads. Obviously, you always get leads that you're going to follow. But one of the things that I thought early on was, if we ever get to a point where Regina and Bill are not talking, we need to go back and reapproach her.
Lacking any new developments, months turn into years, leaving detectives and the Wellnitz's loved ones frustrated.
What are we missing? What are we not doing? They're friends of mine, and this was one of those cases that you want to solve before your career is over. It was just like you were at a dead end, and we couldn't figure that out,
When the case went cold, it was very disheartening just knowing that someone had committed this terrible crime and that they may possibly never have to pay for that. I just remember feeling so sad. Beth and Joe were just such a light in our community.
You don't have any answers when it happened. Had no idea of who could have done it or why they would have done it. There was so little information coming out, it just kind of fell to the wayside. It's just sad.
The case remains cold for nearly a decade. But in 2002, detectives decide to take a fresh look at the triple homicide.
This case is still on my mind. I had never forgot it. And I said, okay, what's the condition or what's the status of Bill and Regina? And I learned at that point that they were separated. That was the thing that we were waiting on before, is when this separation occurred, to go see what Regina had to say outside of the control of Bill Meese.
Police track Regina down, and what she has to tell them is shocking.
When we met with Regina in Lexington, she told us that she had proof of who killed the Wellnitzes.
Years after the murder of Joe and Beth Wellnitz and their son Dennis, police finally have a break in the case. One of their surviving daughter Meg's best friends, Regina Meese, says she knows who the killer is and has proof.
When we approached her, she immediately said, "I've got this piece of evidence." She essentially wanted some assurance that she wouldn't be charged with tampering with evidence. And I assured her that if she in fact turned it over to law enforcement, I didn't think it would even constitute a crime. Now, at that time, we didn't know if she had photographs that perhaps were taken during the commission of the crime. We didn't know if she may have had the firearm that was used in the commission of the crime, or what piece of evidence that she had. But she shared with us that she had in fact retained possession of the fire safe that had been removed from the back closet in the bedroom upstairs of Beth and Joe's home.
When police ask Regina how she got the safe, she says the person who gave it to her is the one who shot the Wellnitzes.
Regina's one started the ball rolling. Everything started to fall in place. Regina told us that Bill Meese was the one responsible for the death of Dennis and the death of Joe and Beth Wellnitz. It was very shocking, very shocking.
She had been interviewed by the police before, but had been told by her then husband, now ex-husband, not to talk to the police, not to tell them anything. And it certainly appeared, at least, to be a burden lifted that she was able to share this information.
It was a huge deal when we heard what she had to say. That was the part that we needed to happen, and that from there on, it steamrolled from there.
Regina takes police to her home to see the fire safe.
It was the same type and everything that we were missing from the house that night. It was the same measurements, the same dimensions that we had measured when we were in the Wellness house and discovered that the safe was missing.
When we later compared the bottom impressions on that fire safe to the imprints taken from the closet, it was a perfect match, and in fact it was the fire safe that was stolen from the Wellness home.
Nothing of significant value is found in the safe, but Regina delivers another explosive revelation to police. She tells them that Bill is planning to kill again.
Interviewing Bill Meese's ex-wife, it came to the attention of the police that a mutual friend had had an encounter with Bill Meese where he had offered to kill her boyfriend.
Bill had told her that he would commit this murder for her for $500.
I mean, it was just incredible. It was disturbing.
Was Bill some kind of twisted serial murderer? Police decide to move before he can strike once more.
We initiated this investigation and contacted that lady that Bill had approached.
She agreed to wear a recording device, speak with Bill Meese. He was provided a certain sum of money as a down payment, and the police then arrested him for offering to kill this mutual friend's boyfriend.
With Bill in jail, police question him about the Wellnitz triple homicide.
There was no statements made about the Wellnitz murder that he was willing to make at that time.
When we interviewed him there, I mean, we did not get a confession from him. He denied it at that point. Even though we knew that we were on the right track, it still takes evidence to put this together.
As detectives work on building their case with Bill still in custody, news spreads quickly about his arrest and possible involvement in the shooting of Joe, Beth, and Dennis.
When I first heard about Bill being a suspect, it sent shivers up my spine because I immediately am flooded with the memories of being in junior high with Bill and having very, very strange interactions with him. I was 13, 14 years old. He at one point stabbed me in the leg with a pencil. He had been open about talking about murder and proceeded to threaten me that if I said anything about it, that he'd kill me and my family. I hadn't seen my dad in years when I went to school with Bill. I don't know how they knew each other.
One question remains for police. If Bill murdered the Wellnitzes, what was his motive? Detectives learn another piece of shocking information when Regina tells them Bill might have pulled the trigger, but someone else masterminded the killings.
She did share with us that Meg had been involved in the planning of this murder and that she had wanted it done. Certainly that was shocking to everybody. She said that Meg had ridden with Bill Meese from Lexington down to Columbia late night, early morning when these murders occurred.
Meg was a big part of the planning and execution of the plan at her parents' house. What we also learned is that they had been planning this 3 months prior to the murders before they did it. We believed at this time that Meg and Bill Meese were the ones responsible for the murders. We had ruled out Regina and Randy Appleton at this time. It was a bombshell for us to learn that information. I couldn't believe it. Totally unexpected.
10 years after Joe, Beth, and Dennis Wellnitz were shot in cold blood, police now believe Meg Wellnitz wanted her parents dead and asked her friend Bill Meese to kill them.
Based upon my prior history with Meg Wellnitz, I would have never dreamed that she would have been involved in that murder of her parents and sibling. She had become that type of person, not the one that I knew from before. And now all of a sudden I see her in a completely different light when she has no compassion for life.
Before they can lay charges, detectives need hard evidence against Meg and Bill.
One of the things that we learned during the investigation, they had purchased a 9mm high-power Browning automatic. We knew they had done that. They used a false ID, and they used it to make the purchase of the gun. We were able to learn that through a report from ATF, and we actually identified who sold that gun to them, and that the person that sold it to them actually identified Meg and Bill as being the ones that came in.
On February 27, 2003, detectives finally have the evidence they need.
This case was presented to an Adair County grand jury, and the grand jury indicted both Meg Wellnitz and Bill Meese.
Meg is arrested at her home in Lexington, but refuses to speak to police. Bill, who is serving a 12-year sentence for the murder-for-hire plot, is ready to talk.
During his statement, he certainly indicated to us Meg Wellnitz was involved in the planning. This was done at her urging. This was her idea, and that she wanted it done.
We agreed that she wanted to have her parents killed. She claimed the estate was worth $1 million. She would give me 10% of that estate in exchange for killing her parents.
We had the motivation being money. What we learned was that Meg and Bill drove from Lexington that morning down to Columbia, and that Meg gave Bill the key to the front door. She stays in the car. She does not go into the house.
I walked through the house, the back room. Joe came out of the back room. I engaged him, fired on him. He came toward me and I continued firing. He fell. I went upstairs, into the hall. Elizabeth was standing next to her bed. I engaged and fired on her. She fell. I came back down the hall. I entered Dennis's grave. He was sitting on his bed. I engaged him. I emptied the magazine of weapons. He was still sitting up at that time. He got on the floor, got on the floor, and I shot him. I then went into the back bedroom and into the closet and got the firebox, took the box down in the car, took off the clothes I was wearing. I put all of those items as well as the firearm, 3 magazines, in a black plastic trash bag. I put the black trash bag in the trash container and drove back to Lexington. We got back to Lexington about 6:30 or 7.
It truly was a chilling account of just how cold-hearted he was, not only in doing it, but in talking about it.
Police confront Meg with Bill's confession.
She agreed to then give a statement. When we met with Meg, my observation and my perception of her demeanor and her statements to us certainly was not one of any remorse. It was a matter-of-fact description of what she had done some years prior in having her family killed.
I don't think I could have ever thought of Meg committing a murder or being a part of a murder plan. I know that life insurance might seem like a lot of money, but when you put that cost on lives, it's nothing. Like it's unfathomable to think that she considered their lives that invaluable.
Bill Meese was convicted by a jury of 3 counts of murder, robbery, and burglary, and he was sentenced to death. Meg Wellnitz was convicted of complicity to 3 counts of murder, complicity to robbery, and complicity to burglary, and she received a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole for at least 25 years.
It's very disturbing to know that this little sweet girl that I remember has been the one that actually played such a big role in this murder. Meg orchestrated one of the most horrendous crimes that you could imagine, killing your mom and dad and also your brother.
I do not think that Meg receiving 25 years was a just sentence. I think she was as guilty as Bill Meese, and I think she should have been given the same type of sentence as Bill Meese, death.
For their daughter to have been the killer was about the most unexpected thing. It was such a shock to try to wrap your head around how could a daughter carry out or be the mastermind. It does not get any more heartless than that, and it does not get any more sickening than that. She didn't deserve to ever be free again.
In 2014, having served 8 years of her life sentence, Meg is found dead in her cell of an apparent suicide.
I certainly could never have imagined that things would have turned out this way. I just feel sad that Joe wasn't able to live out his life the way that he deserved to and continue to give back to the community that he was a part of and
I begged her for an ounce of her strength so that I could put one foot in front of the other.
Tonight on 2020, an unbreakable bond between mother and daughter, but someone came between them.
He's like, Mom's dead, and he just kept repeating, Mom's dead, Mom's dead.
I ran downstairs and was hysterical and started vomiting.
She was found laying right here.
And I said, Mom, you can go right over there because that's the person that killed my mom.
But just who was she pointing at?
This is a delicate question, whether somebody that she was having an affair with could have had her killed.
He started thinking about ways to engage his exit strategy.
To get rid of her.
Hold on, he's coming out.
Tonight, a daughter's discovery of family secrets and scandals leading to a dramatic showdown.
Drop the gun! Drop the gun!
Behind the scenes, Kim was nonstop digging for answers, getting proof.
Now, a new courtroom development as we take you inside her obsessed 6-year crusade to catch the killer.
What kind of crimes?
You're talking murder.
2020 tonight going into a dangerous underworld no one could have imagined.
Drugs and a lot of money, inevitably a murder of April Kaufman.
Before this hour is over, there will be another shocking death. But is that the end of the story?
This is my life, and I feel like this is the worst made-for-TV movie on the planet.
Good evening, I'm Amy Robach.
And I'm David Muir, and this is 2020. And here tonight, Deborah Roberts.
WIBG, it's the talk of South Jersey.
Driving the corridor between Atlantic City and Philadelphia weekdays between the hours of 2 and 4, you may have heard this voice on WIBG FM.
If you don't vote, I will find out I'm going to your house. I'm dragging you outside.
That's the no-nonsense April Kaufman, a peppery, provocative radio host.
I love being here to bring you the truth. As unvarnished, as unpretty, unbuttered on the biscuit it is.
Tackling topics from politics, caring for U.S. vets.
Homelessness is a big issue in our country right now for our veterans.
Listeners couldn't get enough of the Jersey girl with the platinum hair, big smile, and high wattage personality.
She was like a whirlwind Like, she would come in and she would make a lasting impression on everyone.
In her upscale town of Linwood, New Jersey, not far from the boardwalk, April and husband Dr. Jim Kaufman, a prominent endocrinologist, are the community's consummate power couple.
The two of them were well known individually as well as together. They really wanted to be involved in the community, but they also like to have some fun.
Every day, the doctor and Mrs. Kaufman had a familiar routine. Jim heading to his medical practice before sunrise, and then a standing phone call with April at 8:30 a.m. But on Thursday, May 10th, 2012, that call to April goes unanswered. And after several failed attempts, Dr. Kaufman sends over his handyman to their home on Woodstock Drive, where he discovers a horror.
911, where's your emergency?
Yes, I have my bosses down. She's lying on the floor in her bedroom and not answering me.
Okay, where are you, sir?
2 Woodstock Drive, Linwood.
Okay, hold on, I'm transferring you.
47-year-old April Kaufman found dead on the floor of her bedroom. With the family handyman on with 911, Jim calls Linwood police.
This is Dr. Kaufman. I just got a call by my house person that my wife is face down on the floor.
My partner's sending out the ambulance as we speak.
Okay. Well,
Okay.
I'm getting there as fast as I can.
Detective James Scopa took me inside the home where the wealthy socialite who once lived larger than life was discovered dead, shot multiple times.
She was found laying right here.
Face down.
Face down.
As the media got there and they started to realize who it was, that's when they knew, okay, this is really a story. It was chaos.
As the steady whir of helicopter blades begins swarming the sky, Jim Kaufman makes another phone call, this one to stepdaughter Kim Pack.
I answer the phone and I say hello, and he's like, Kimberly? And I said yes. He's like, Mom's dead. And he just kept repeating, Mom's dead, over and over. And as I got to the front door, there was a police officer that put his hands out, and I pushed his hands away. And I go, where's my mom? Where's my mom? What is happening here? I need to see my mother. He said, we think this is a potential homicide.
No one could imagine who would have shot April Kaufman. Beautiful, blonde, glamorous, and she was fun. No one had any idea what was going on behind those closed doors.
She made everybody feel like they were her best friend. Didn't matter who they were, the checkout, the parking lot cart guy, you know, hey beautiful, hey handsome, how you doing today?
Friends Peg O'Boyle and Lee Darby knew April since she was a teenager and knew her well enough to know that her outward glow masked an inner pain.
She had a really rough childhood. When April was 11, her mother gave her brothers and sister up for adoption, and April was raised by her grandmother, and her brothers and sister were put into foster care.
You know, I think she had her thirst for being, you know, feeling loved. She just wanted to be loved.
She would discover unconditional love at 17 when she gave birth to Kim with her first husband.
She was an incredible mom. She seemed to just instinctively know what to do.
She always spoke to Kimberly like a little adult, and we used to call her Agnes Beeswax, because she was this little old soul. April just wanted the best for her and gave her the best that she possibly could. You know, she worked hard.
April dropped out of school when she became pregnant, but she got her GED. She clawed her way back. She opened a salon, a catering business, a cafe, a charity worker.
But while April worked hard, she played hard too.
She liked motorcycles and fast cars?
She did. When she got her first motorcycle, she said, I'll give you $300 to get on the back of my motorcycle. And I was like, no way. My feet are on the ground. And she would be like, all right, $500. And I'm like, no, I'm not getting on the back of your motorcycle. Just the need for speed and wasn't afraid.
After 2 failed marriages, she meets Dr. Jim Kaufman. Friends and family say the wild child finally had found her match.
He drives a Harley, he's smoking cigars, he's a Green Beret in the military, a doctor.
In fact, this caricature sketched for Jim's 60th birthday seems to sum up the couple's life. There's April, the buxom Jersey girl, overshadowed by her larger-than-life new husband, who's prominently depicted with a gun, big cigar, and something else, military tattoos. Conditions.
There were 2 rules to this interview. 1, you can never ask my mother about anything pertaining to this interview. And 2, you have to destroy the tape when you're finished.
That's a little mysterious.
Yeah, but I just thought out of respect, this is what he's asking. He talks about how
Motivated to mount a campaign, using her radio voice to demand quality health care for veterans.
This was such a big issue that affected our veterans and our state, our country. So I will thank my husband for a lot of the things that I've learned over the years.
April felt that veterans should be treated like rock stars.
So how did this fierce and loved advocate for casualties of war become a casualty herself? Kim has an idea and approaches investigators with a shocking declaration.
As I made my way out into the cul-de-sac, I look up in the air and there's all these news choppers flying up above. And I said, well, you can go right over there because that's the person that killed my mom.
Stay with us.
Many attended today's funeral services at Bethel Synagogue in Margate for 47-year-old April Kaufman.
Mother's Day 2012, the town of Linwood, New Jersey turns out for one of its own, complete with a cortege of veterans leading their champion, April Kaufman, to her final resting place.
The well-known local radio host, who was shot multiple times and discovered dead in her Linwood home last Thursday.
It was like a state procession for April Kaufman. No one could believe what had happened.
She just was so caring, so compassionate. She just was an inspiration to everybody.
The loss heaviest for April's daughter, Kim.
I miss her calling me nonstop, all the time. I miss her laugh. I miss her smile. I miss her infinite wisdom, because she really was my rock.
After the mourning came the murmuring. Sometimes talk is cheap, even in wealthy towns.
This is a delicate question, but there were questions about whether your mom was having affairs.
They had a very unhealthy relationship, the both of them. And I will just say that there were indiscretions on both sides of the fence. And I'll leave it at that.
Did it concern you that maybe somebody that she had been involved with could have killed her?
No, but I certainly provided those people's names to the police, and I allowed them to do their due diligence.
While the community is in shock and awash in rumor and innuendo, listen to this, April's final radio broadcast, where she sounds like a woman who thinks her days are numbered.
And my bottom line is, if nothing else, of my legacy of leaving, a really beautiful daughter and 2 grandchildren on this planet, I really hope to God that people, hey, I could get a flyover at my funeral now.
You listen back to that and you think, did she have a premonition? It's kind of like she was trying to tell us something, I believe.
In those early days after her mom's death, there's one thing gnawing at Kim. One person she's curiously not getting consolation from? Her stepdad, Dr. Jim Kaufman.
Dr. James Kaufman was a very well-respected and well-regarded member of this community. But to Kim, stepfather Jim was a very different person.
He was very cold to me, always kept me at an arm's length.
Literally. Just look at the pained body language in this video taken on Kim's wedding day.
1, 2, and 3. There you go.
Take a close look. He steps into the scene. He smiles one time for the camera to flash. Then he goes back to a very taciturn demeanor and steps out. No hugging, no kissing, no warmth, nothing.
You would be in the dining room, I would be talking to my mom, and he would come and turn the lights off and just walk out the room.
He controlled her cash flow and
yes.
how much money she could spend?
Oh, yes. And sometimes even calling her, who are you with? Where are you?
And just 2 months before April's murder, it seems the bloom was officially off the rose of her nearly 10-year marriage. Kim recalling a lunch where her mother confides she's had enough.
She talked about that she really needed to start aligning herself and getting herself in a good spot to be able to leave. I think that he had made it clear to her that she wasn't going to divorce him and take half of his empire. That was his famous words.
Did you get any feeling that your mom might have been in any kind of danger?
She had made it clear over the years that he had threatened to kill her several times, but would always follow up with, he doesn't have the guts to do it.
Though Jim is not named a suspect, some might say he begins acting like one.
Within days of April's body being found, Jim hires a lawyer.
Not only a lawyer, but the lawyer, a mob lawyer.
Ed Jacobs, one of the biggest legal names in Atlantic County. He's even defended Bill Cosby in one of his sex assault accusations.
He loves defending high-profile criminal cases. His walls in his office are covered with news clips of himself.
One possible reason he's not named a suspect, he's got an airtight alibi. That's him entering a local convenience store around the same time his wife is being gunned down.
Authorities are not releasing details, but it appears that Kaufman's shooting death was not random.
I meet him in a restaurant, and he says to me, let me tell you something. I have a very good attorney, and I'd been advised to not speak to anybody about this. He's like, you might need to really start to realize that this is never going to be solved. And I said, well, I'm not going to realize that. I said, because I will never stop finding out. And I walked away, and I never spoke to him ever again.
As the months drag on, Kim says the only cold shoulder icier than Jim's is the one she's getting from then Atlantic County prosecutor Jim McLean.
I had several meetings with him, and he would just say it was active and open and not really say much more.
Did you get the impression that he was determined to get to the bottom of this?
No.
Then, on the one-year anniversary of April's murder, many turn out for a candlelight vigil, including so many vets she made her cause. Noticeably absent, Dr. Jim Kaufman. He marks the milestone another way.
We discovered that he was getting ready to auction off all of April's belongings and hadn't given anything to Kim.
How crushing was that for you?
Beyond, because the things that I asked for that belonged to my mother were family heirlooms or possibly Disney coffee mugs.
With her mother and all those mementos lost, Kim tries to adjust to a new normal while raising her 2 young sons and holding down her job as a pharmaceutical sales rep.
Marching through every single day, waking up with another day of hopelessness while trying to keep that glimmer of hope alive is a very tricky thing to do.
Yet while life for Kim seems hopelessly on pause, for Jim Kaufman, it's full speed ahead. Just 15 months after his wife's murder, he ties the knot again.
He remarries Carol Weintraub. When did that start? Now, the version we've gotten is that they started dating after April was found murdered. Now that's some romance.
April's friends and family were devastated, and they felt like it was a slap in the face, but the people who support Jim Kaufman say, you know, he's a widow, and he's moving on with his life.
But Dr. Kaufman's next move sets off a chain of events that pushes Kim out of limbo.
He went after my mom's life insurance policy.
And your reaction?
No way. Because you know what? This was my only attempt to maybe be able to get some answers, and the truth maybe would start to come out.
Now it's Kim's turn to lawyer up. Believing Jim is the killer, she files a wrongful death suit against her stepdad to keep him from getting her mom's $600,000 life insurance policy.
I have no choice to respond and to begin to fight for what I know is right.
The most significant kind of civil lawsuit you can have is a wrongful death case.
Coming up, a daughter undaunted, and the dynamic duo attorneys she hires begin digging into the case, and what they say they uncover is shocking.
We were talking to people that were critical witnesses to us that had not spoken to the prosecutor's office.
And their chance to grill the grieving good doctor.
He was under oath in a civil deposition. They could ask him anything.
Next. Atlantic City, legendary for its slots, signature shows, and of course, this moment. But the boom and the bust of the casino industry has made America's favorite playground a hotbed for crime, corruption, and a startling number of unsolved cases. Cases like April Kaufman's, but Kim Pack and her dogged attorneys, Patrick and Andrew Darcy, drill down, determined to get answers.
Behind the scenes, Kim, with us, was nonstop digging for answers, getting proof. We were on an island, all on our own.
But the tide may be turning.
I grew up on the beaches and the boardwalk of Atlantic City, and I always say I have sand in my shoes.
Meet Damon Tyner, son of one of Atlantic City's fabled firefighters and a longtime cop.
Your dad was a bit of a legend.
Yeah, he was very well known throughout the community.
But the younger Tyner made a name for himself as a Superior Court judge.
Good to see you. How you making out? So they named a pizza for me.
I think right here.
Yep, that would be me.
And then last year,
I, Damon G. Tyner,
became the first black prosecutor in the county's history.
So help me God.
Many seeing him as the city's much-needed savior.
You're doing a good job, man.
I appreciate it.
Great job.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Joe, you all right?
No, I'm not judge anymore.
Good to see you.
That man's cleaning up AC.
There you go.
You took a pledge when you took the office. Tell me about the pledge.
Dating back to 1970, there are about 140 unsolved homicides. I urged my executive staff to tell me which cases were most solvable. Unanimously, they all came back to me and said the murder of April Kaufman.
But Tyner is sworn in almost 5 years after April Kaufman's murder. 5 long years.
A lot of people wondered why 5 years passed and no recognizable work had been done.
It wasn't that there were glaring mistakes. It was just an omission of effort, you might say.
We wondered about that and tried asking former prosecutor Jim McClain about the investigation. His spokesperson tells 2020 McClain has no comment.
Fortunately, Damon Tyner became prosecutor, and his team came to the conclusion that this case should be prosecuted. For the first time, someone's listening here.
Tyner agreed to meet Kim Pack and her lawyers within that first month.
What did that mean to you?
The fact that I was lucky enough for him to say, I'm going to take a second look at this. Me, my case, thank you. Like, this is all I've been asking for this entire time, is for someone to care.
It took 3 hours for Kim's lawyers to unpack all they had uncovered.
You should take a look at these records.
But no evidence as compelling or illuminating as this.
Today's July the 11th, 2014.
A 4.5-hour-long video deposition of Dr. Jim Kaufman himself, finally talking for that wrongful death lawsuit Kim has filed.
Basically, I ask the questions, you give the answers. Understood?
Yes.
4.5 hours under oath is a lot of time. That's a lot of questions.
I do. Okay. We may proceed.
That was the first time he could be compelled to talk.
There he is in the hot seat for the very first time, getting grilled on everything from his love of guns.
How many guns do you own?
Approximately 18.
To the moment he first saw his wife lying lifeless on the floor.
I ran upstairs. I looked inside and unfortunately saw April lying there. And she wasn't moving, and she had a pallor, which I've known after 30 years is obviously someone has passed away. And I ran downstairs and went out on the lawn and was hysterical and started vomiting.
Okay, do you have tissues, by the way?
I got them.
Do you need to break?
When I look at a deposition, I sometimes turn the sound down. I don't want to hear what they're saying. I want to see what they look like and what their facial expressions are. He struck me as a manipulative guy.
But there's a barrel-sized bombshell about to drop. The doctor's casual and stunning admission about a secret he's been keeping for years. Seems that time he spent in the Special Forces wasn't so special.
Have you ever served in any branch of the military?
No.
That's right, Dr. Kaufman forced to come clean about his so-called...
Did you ever tell Kim Pack you were in the military?
Yes.
Okay. Did she ever do a project for college, and part of the project was you being in the military?
Yes.
And what you went through?
Yes.
And that you carried bodies?
Yes.
And the torture that you had gone through?
Yes.
Did you ever tell anyone that you were a Green Beret?
Yes.
Who'd you tell?
I don't recall how many people I told.
So he created this background that didn't even really exist.
That is correct. Once you start examining someone who is bold enough to engage in stolen valor, you start realizing that there are other aspects to this man's life that would require us to investigate.
But in that deposition, Dr. Kaufman posits his own theories about who may have killed his wife.
Who do you think did it?
I thought it could be someone who was one of the veterans. The last choice was that it was someone in a motorcycle gang.
What motorcycle gang?
The Pagans.
The Pagan motorcycle gang? Remember, April had a penchant for motorcycles. Could that mean she was in deep with the kind of people known for violent behavior?
The pagan outlaws are the equivalent of the Hell's Angels. They are felons of the most dangerous sort.
Coming up, a stunning turn in the Kaufman case.
No, I killed myself.
Leading to a standoff in the Garden State. We're on the beat with James Scopa, lead detective determined to crack a big case for Atlantic City's new prosecutor.
I was happy when Prosecutor Tyner came in and he allowed us to work on a case and investigate it like we believed it should be.
Meanwhile, Kim and her lawyers keep their eye on what they believe is the prize, Jim Kaufman, using his pictures on social media as incentive.
I would get a picture of Jim Kaufman and Carol at the Final Four and, you know, smiling, and I'd put it on my brother's screen so that when he came in the morning, that would be the first thing he'd see is a picture of Jim Kaufman saying, yeah, so what? I killed her. What are you going to do about it?
But there's an unexpected canary in Kaufman's coal mine. It's coming in the form of a tip from the FBI. The feds believe Kaufman may be involved in another unrelated crime.
Lo and behold, another investigation related to insurance fraud, his role as a doctor, comes up.
Investigators get a warrant to search his office.
So they show up at Kaufman's clinic just to look at his records.
On June 13th, 2017, we attempted to serve a search warrant at Dr. Kaufman's office here.
Within minutes, it's clear this will not be a routine visit.
Detective Scoop with the prosecutor's office I met you last week. Stay right here for me. Just keep your names off down there. No.
What does he do instead of ushering them in as most of us would with?
They're there. Changes everything.
The husband of a murdered South Jersey radio host and advocate is behind bars following an early morning standoff.
Investigators say that same day they seized more weapons from Kaufman and at least $100,000 in cash. That was a game changer.
After the standoff with Jim Kaufman, he goes to jail, not for murder, but for weapons charges. He fights to try to get out. The judge would not let him out based on his conduct, and that gives the new prosecutor, Tyner, a chance to really dig into the murder case.
Starting with the crime scene.
So this is the house here. The bedroom that April was found was upstairs.
But the biggest break in the case doesn't come from inside this house at all.
We knew Dr. Kaufman that there was a point in time that he was inquiring about having her killed. And
how'd you find that out?
We were able to get a witness to cooperate with us this past November. That broke the case.
And who was that witness? A former member of the Pagans Motorcycle Club. Remember them? They're the ones Dr. Kaufman had pointed the finger at in his deposition.
The last choice was that it was someone in a motorcycle gang.
What motorcycle gang?
The Pagans.
But now the tables have turned. One of those pagans ratting out Kaufman, and not just for murder. Prosecutor Tyner on January 9th, 2018.
Hey, Sergeant, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Damon G. Tyner.
At a press conference, Tyner lays out the case of an elaborate and secret double life that Dr. Jim Kaufman was leading. Treating patients by day, writing fraudulent opioid prescriptions for those pagans by night.
They would come in and be patients, and all of a sudden you had a prominent endocrinologist that was prescribing opioids and all kinds of other painkillers when that wasn't quite his practice.
So he's got the power of the prescription, and then they've got the gang activity.
Essentially, they were flooding the market with opioids and selling them at a marked up price.
What a bombshell. This straight-laced doctor that everyone had respected was part of a pill mill, a drug ring. And not only that, with the pagan outlaw motorcycle gang. And April Kaufman found out.
Found out and, according to Tyner, threatened to expose his secret seedy double life.
He started thinking about ways to engage his exit strategy.
To get rid of her.
To get rid of her. For the past 5.5 years since April Kaufman was found shot to death, there's been little movement on this case, and no arrests had been made in connection with the murder. That is until today.
An explosive breakthrough in the murder of radio host April Kaufman.
Murder charges just filed against Dr. James Kaufman in a plot that police say involved members of a motorcycle gang.
But wait a minute, didn't the doctor have an airtight alibi? Remember that early morning stop at a convenience store? Tyner says Kaufman wasn't the shooter, that he paid one of those pagans roughly $20,000 to do his dirty work and kill his wife.
He went inside and he shot April Kaufman twice.
And ironically, that alleged hitman died a year and a half after April's murder of an opiate overdose. His pills prescribed by, you guessed it, Dr. Jim Kaufman.
When I heard the details of everything, it really, really was unbelievable. I feel like this is the worst made-for-TV movie on the planet.
The prosecutor worries Dr. Kaufman could be targeted by pagan members in jail, so they move him upstate to the Hudson County Correctional Facility as they begin gearing up for their first major trial. Finally, a chance to close one of those Atlantic County cold cases. But then, another shocking turn.
Dr. James Kaufman dead. Officials with the Hudson County Correctional Facility confirmed that he died at 9:20 this morning.
What was your reaction when you heard this?
I was stunned.
The story started off terrible and is ending terrible.
Dr. Jim Kaufman dead. But how?
Were you worried that he could be hurt in prison?
That's always a concern.
Will justice ever be served? Stay with us. It's been a long, strange trip for Dr. Jim Kaufman, from a plush suburban cul-de-sac to the Hudson County Jail. His new home, a 6 by 9 foot cell like this.
This is unit. This is Charlie 500 East. Maximum security.
The inmates, many considered violent and dangerous, were Dr. Kaufman's new neighbors as he awaited his trial in a facility just across the river from New York City.
What kind of crimes?
You're talking murder.
It's rare to get a look inside these tight quarters unless you're an inmate, but corrections officers agreed to take us in, recalling that fateful morning. Just after serving Dr. Kaufman breakfast, they made a grim discovery. The doctor was dead, hanging himself with a laundry cord.
I was stunned, but that's, in retrospect, that's what convinces me now more than ever that he understood that the end was near.
He realized it had all caught up with him.
Yes, I think so.
Bottom line, he had his wife murdered, and the only way out for him was suicide.
Kaufman did leave something behind in that jail cell. This note obtained by 2020.
Even in that jail cell, when he killed himself, he had to write this very lengthy suicide note to be in control at the very end, to get the last word.
Kaufman adamant that he didn't kill April.
I cannot live like this. No matter what anybody says, did not do anything to my wife.
This 6-page suicide note is bizarre.
Throughout the note, he quotes Latin, including phrases that Roman gladiators would say to the emperor before they fought in the Colosseum. Really?
His final words do add a surprisingly new angle to the sordid saga.
April came to me and said, would I like to go to a motorcycle rally to meet some of her friends? I was slightly shocked, to say the least, that they had the colors of pagans.
The most important thing that Jim Kaufman wants people to take away from this note is, I didn't kill April. She introduced me to this outlaw gang. I was prescribing pills. They then got aggressive with me. They then started threatening me. And they're the ones who killed April.
Were you able to determine whether April had any involvement with either the gang or the pill mill?
Our investigation at the time did not lead us to believe that she had any involvement. I believe that at some point she became aware of it. I think ultimately that's the reason why she was killed.
But dead men tell no tales, at least not in court. And with both that alleged hitman and Jim Kaufman deceased, Tyner's last call for justice would rest with the case against the accused pagan ringleader, who he believes conspired with Kaufman to kill April. Just weeks ago, that case unfolded in a New Jersey courtroom, Freddie Augello on trial. It took a jury less than 2 hours to find Augello guilty of all counts in connection with the murder of April Kaufman. A painful conclusion for a grieving daughter, yet a measure of solace. Kim Pack may finally find the justice she's been seeking for years.
Why do you think this case wasn't solved 6 years ago?
I don't know, that's the million-dollar question. But what I do know is that I was blessed and granted the ability to have peace in my life for the first time in 6 years by a man with determination and that believed in my story. And that is Damon Tyner, and I am forever grateful to that man.
Although in a tale as twisted and tragic as this, there's hardly any true closure.
And that's the saddest part of this entire story. Her mom's still not coming back. And when everything's quiet and it's just Kim and she's alone and she's thinking, her best friend's gone.
We were robbed. And for what? I still don't have the answer to that. For what?
When we come back, one of those precious family heirlooms sold at auction has been recovered. The secret message from beyond the grave found inside, next. Kim Pack doesn't just resemble her mom, she's inherited the same passion that made April Kaufman so beloved.
She's like a pit bull. She is. She latches on and she's not letting go until she gets what she's looking for.
She's a mini April.
There's been dark days, very dark days, where I just didn't know how I was going to do this. But I knew that I needed to stand up. This story needed to be told.
But in that darkness, something special. Remember when Jim sold off all of April's belongings? Turns out Lee Darby and Peg O'Boyle, dubbing themselves April's Angels, swooped in.
These women got together and they were on the phone calling people, raising money to be able to buy back things that belonged to my mother.
So that's how you got the last remnants of your mom's things?
Yes. And my mom collected these little Limoges things, and this was the first item that I touched from the auction. And inside this note, it says, "To Kimberly, from Mom. Whenever you look at this, you know you're always loved. You're so special. Best wishes for the rest of your life."
And you had no idea that note was there?
No, and I feel like this was meant to be. I feel like I was meant to have this. I keep this by my bed. It reminds me that my mom is with me all the time.
Out in the community, other reminders.
My husband and my boys got this bench dedicated for her. It's special because it's a spot that we saw. I think she would say to me now, you can breathe, you can go on and live, you don't have to be sad anymore. And thank you for fighting.
A fighter to the finish. Remember Kim Pack's civil case to get her mother's life insurance?
But we can report tonight that her attorney now says that's been amicably settled with Kaufman's widow. And that is 2020 for tonight. I'm David Muir.
And I'm Amy Robach. From all of us here at ABC News in 2020, good night.
On the day before the Jamisons disappear, they load their pickup truck and drive 30 miles to Oklahoma's Panola Mountain.
They were looking for property. They were looking to go buy 40 acres of land in a very rural area.
The Jamisons had actually learned about the land on the internet.
The parcel of land is situated in a remote area near an abandoned oil well.
It is really forested area. There's a lot of cliffs and ravines. That's what they like, though. They liked nature.
Those who know Bobby and Sherilyn Jamison say the couple looked at Panola Mountain as a fresh start, a new beginning for them and their young daughter.
They like to go look at land and imagine what if and fantasize about, you know, building whatever, their dream businesses, homes, whatever.
Nikki Shenold has been Sherilyn Jamison's closest friend for more than 10 years.
She used to say a lot, you have to stand for something. I don't care what you stand for, but you have to stand for something. When she believed in something, she believed in it with her whole heart.
Friends and family say that when Sherilyn met Bobby Jamison in the summer of 2002, she knew he was the man for her.
Sherilyn decided right then and there that she liked him and she was interested. Bobby was a very gentle man. He was a good man. He didn't want to do anybody wrong.
They fell in love and got married in July of 2004. Later that summer, the Jamisons have a baby girl and name her Madison.
Madison was my son's, I guess, best gift in his whole life.
Where are you going, Tissy? Looky, there you are on TV.
She was just, you know, a beautiful child, and her and I were best friends.
Madison.
For Bobby and Sherilyn, moving to Panola Mountain is the next step in building a simpler life. They're excited to join the small community living there, people who prize independence and self-sufficiency.
There's very few people that live up there. Even the ones that do have the bare minimum needs.
In order to have electricity, you have to really have a generator. Some people have septic systems, some people don't. It's a pretty rustic way of life.
When it comes to being off the grid, they're as close as you probably could be in this area.
On the morning the Jamisons start to explore the mountain where they hope to make their new home, they become lost in a maze of dirt roads. They run into one of the handful of people living up there and ask for directions.
He's out there working, he sees them come up. They're talking about buying land in that area. They're asking him questions about, okay, how do you build on a place, you know? How do you do the things that you need to do to be able to live in this area?
Bobby and Sherilyn get directions to the plot of land they're considering and decide to return the next day. The following morning, they drive back up the mountain, looking forward to seeing the place where they would live out their dreams.
I think they wanted to get away from everybody and be able to enjoy life on their own, not to have to answer to anybody.
It's pretty desolate, but I think desolate at that point was what they were looking for. They were just kind of looking to start anew and kind of get away from mainstream.
But the Jamisons' outing comes to an unexpected and mysterious end. 8 days later, hunters on four-wheelers find a locked truck parked on a dirt road near the top of Panola Mountain.
They peeked in the window and they saw a dog, and the dog was not doing so well. It had been locked in that truck for multiple days.
There wasn't any food for the dog. I mean, she was a survivor. She was a survivor to live through that.
There is no sign of the Jamesons anywhere on the hilltop. The Latimer County Sheriff's Office is called.
The call just came in that there's an abandoned truck up there. We broke the glass, got the dog out of there. We started to do an inventory on the vehicle to try to find out who they were.
When he began to find things in there, he knew that it was something definitely was wrong. They had cell phones in their truck, and their billfolds were there, her purse was there. You know, it was like they had just disappeared.
Because their coats, phones, and money are all left behind, police believe that Bobby and Sherilyn, along with their 6-year-old daughter, Madison, must be lost nearby in the woods.
After we started looking through everything, we were figuring, okay, they're up here.
It would be quite easy for somebody to go out there and get bit by a snake and to not be able to get back to the truck and just to not be able to find your way around.
Police conduct an immediate search of the area surrounding the truck.
I had 5 or 6 deputies up there. Started calling out their names once we figured out who they were, trying to get some type of reply from them.
Rugged terrain makes the search doubly challenging.
You can get lost in the woods up there very easily unless you know where you're going. Because if you get in the midst of the trees, you can't see, very far ahead.
For law enforcement, time is of the essence.
There was a child missing. It was getting towards, middle, end of October. The nights were getting colder, and they didn't have their jackets with them because those were left in the truck.
We knew that they had been there 8 to 9 days, and you're getting on that timeline there to where, the chances of making it, we're at that point now.
Why hadn't anyone reported that the Jameson family had been missing for 8 days? The few people that saw their truck guessed that it belonged to a work crew.
There's a lot of wells up in that area, oil wells, gas wells. So a lot of people thought it was just people with an oil field that had come in.
Also, the Jamesons were a very private family, and it wasn't unusual for them to hunker down for several days or longer without speaking to friends or family members.
They had a habit of going out of town for extended periods of time and not really letting anybody know.
We could go a year and not talk and pick up the phone and act as if no time had gone by. That's just the relationship that we had. There's a lot of reasons why no one was alarmed.
Bobby and Sherilyn had also just pulled 6-year-old Madison out of school in preparation for homeschooling her.
The school didn't realize that, Madison wasn't there because she had been taken out.
If it wasn't for the hunters coming down and telling the man that lived close to him about the vehicle, it could have been that much longer.
The sheriff's men on Panola Mountain realized that by now, the Jamesons could be anywhere. They used the family's cell phones to help reconstruct their last known movements.
As we checked the GPS from the phone, we had found out that they didn't spend the majority of the time parked there.
GPS coordinates lead police up a nearby hill, where they find footprints.
The 6-year-old's footprints were there, and that was obvious and easy to identify.
We were able to follow their footprints as well as follow the GPS on the camera up to a rock.
They determined that the Jamesons spend about 15 or 20 minutes up the hill from their truck. And remarkably, they find an eerie memento of the family's time on the hill.
The cell phone had a picture on it of Madison They'd actually taken the picture on a small bluff that was just north of the location, maybe just a couple 100 yards.
It's the last picture that we have of Madison.
It appears to police that after taking the photo, the Jamisons return to their truck and start to leave. What happened next is shrouded in mystery. Then, while scouring the cab for more clues, a deputy sheriff makes a stunning discovery.
He said, "I've got something to tell you, and I think you need to come up here." And I said, "Okay, what's going on?" And he told me, he said, "Hey, there is a substantial amount of money in this vehicle."
A bank bag hidden beneath the driver's seat contains $32,000 in cash.
I wondered why. Why is all this money in here?
Anytime any large amount of cash is found in a vehicle, it raises a lot of red flags.
So at that moment, I said, okay, get everybody away, tape it off as if it was a crime scene. Don't know, what's going on yet, but tape it off.
We really weren't sure why they disappeared.
Coming up, evidence points to a violent event in the Jamisons' disappearance.
I think that they were probably forced out at gunpoint. I mean, why would you struggle if...
Bobby and Sherilyn Jamison and their 6-year-old daughter Madison have disappeared. Investigators find the family's truck abandoned in the Oklahoma backcountry.
A pickup sitting down there, with all of their goods and the dog locked inside the car was very suspicious.
Investigators are confounded by their most recent discovery, a hidden bank bag containing $32,000 in cash.
It's very unlikely that they would leave the vehicle there and lock their cell phones and their wallets and leave all of that in the car on their own accord, but we really didn't know.
Investigators are also baffled that the family dog was apparently left to die in the cab of the truck.
Madison, once she had that puppy, never went anywhere without the puppy.
It just doesn't make any sense, because that was Madison's friend, and she would have screamed and hollered if he'd left the dog in the car.
The whole fact that the dog was in the truck, locked up, and they're nowhere to be found, tells me that they got out of the truck in a hurry.
Even the cell phone picture of 6-year-old Madison prompts speculation among some of their friends.
I don't think her parents took that picture. I think that somebody else that she did not know took that picture. She had her arms out like this, and her hand was over it in a weird position. She was looking off. It wasn't a real smile. She looked very uncomfortable to me. Very uncomfortable.
Police theorized that the Jamisons were in their truck heading back down the mountain when they were interrupted.
It seemed to me like they were leaving, and that someone came up that one-way road, and they stopped. Maybe they knew them, maybe not well. They stopped, talked to the person. From there, obviously, I don't know what happened.
But investigators find no signs of a struggle at the scene of the truck.
Signs of struggle for life or death would be violent. That's not going to be some small tussle.
There was no blood found on the vehicle. There was no broken glass.
You're obviously looking for disturbance on the ground. When people fight, there's clothes that's shredded, there's things that fall out of pockets. Whenever it's that violent, something would be left to show that there was something that happened there.
Still, friends and family think the scene suggests that the Jamisons left against their will.
I think that they were probably forced out at gunpoint. I mean, why would you struggle if someone has a gun to you?
Hopeful for a lead, investigators process every item found in the truck.
At this point, there were so many different things that led us in different directions. We weren't sure if they were lost. We weren't sure if they were abducted.
Then, buried in the clutter filling the cab, they stumble upon something they never expected. An 11-page letter written from Sherilyn to her husband, brimming with hostility.
She was lashing out big time in this letter to Bobby.
It was just a hate and discontent. The years of fighting, She felt that he wanted to be a loner and didn't really need a family. And other than that, I mean, there was just a lot of hate.
Investigators learned that in recent months, there were serious stresses in the Jamisons' marriage.
We learned from their family members that they were having problems. We had learned from the letter that they were talking about getting divorced.
They had been looking at selling their house and kind of moving away to get away from that to make things better.
Much of the strain dates back to 2003, when Bobby was involved in a serious auto accident.
Bobby was driving his truck in 2003, and he had a wreck. He was coming around a curve, which is a blind curve in the road, and this lady hit him from one side, and another lady hit him from the other side.
Since the accident, Bobby suffered from chronic pain and was unable to work.
It is very hard for him to get up out of bed even. Medicine wasn't really helping relieve the pain.
It made it hard for him to do things around the home. And I think that the pain every day, the chronic pain, really put a toll on his spirits. And I think he became depressed, and it made things more difficult in the marriage.
The letter forces investigators to consider a violent scenario in the Jamisons' disappearance. Their concerns heighten when family members tell them that a pistol belonging to Sherilyn Jamison cannot be found.
We didn't know about the .22 pistol until that moment, so we said, no, we haven't found a pistol. And they told us, okay, well, usually she carries this pistol in the vehicle.
Investigators search the Jamisons' truck and house thoroughly. When they find no pistol, they begin to fear the worst.
We got a pistol missing. We have a hate letter here. We're starting to get to point toward maybe murder-suicide. We thought to ourselves that maybe it was her that had killed them.
Coming up, leads in the Jamisons' disappearance go from confusing to downright bizarre.
Bobby had asked him, okay, is there a special bullet that I can buy to kill these?
Been missing for nearly 2 days. The possibility of foul play comes to the forefront of the investigation as police learn more about a troubled marriage and Sherilyn's missing pistol.
A pistol being missing is important. We were told by family members that she carried the pistol everywhere. Maybe this was a murder-suicide.
If a murder-suicide had occurred, the Jamisons' bodies would still be somewhere on Panola Mountain. On October 17th, less than 24 hours after their truck was found, law enforcement begins a massive search.
The emergency management in Latimer County got a hold of all the fire departments in this area, EMS, forestry. Local people started showing up with horses, four-wheelers.
They didn't know where to go, where to start looking. You know, so they just took teams and went up there.
All of the resources of Latimer County are brought to bear. Helicopters, fixed-wing aircraft, tracking dogs, teams of horses and mule, and hundreds of personnel all assist in the search effort. The rough terrain makes everything twice as hard.
It's a triple canopy, a lot of woods, a lot of rocks, almost all of it straight uphill, and very, very tough conditions to try to do a search in.
It was also hazardous and dangerous because a lot of the people didn't know the woods and they could get lost.
Walking up those mountains and trying to keep a straight line and everybody intact is very, very hard to do in that type of terrain.
Tracking dogs are also brought up to Panola Mountain to aid in the search effort.
There were dogs that we brought up to the scene, both cadaver dogs and air scent dogs, to try to locate the Jamison family.
We used some articles from the vehicle to let the dogs take a sniff of it, try to get familiar with their scent.
The dogs start at the truck and fan outward through the surrounding terrain.
They were very interested at the top of the mountain as well as around the truck. They didn't really want to leave that area.
Although acres of woods surround the open area at the top of Panola Mountain, the dogs don't venture off the plateau. they alert on a nearby water tank, signaling investigators to the possible presence of human remains.
The tank was full of water, and the dogs seemed to have hit on it quite a bit. Obviously, we were thinking to ourselves, okay, they might be dead bodies in this tank.
The tank is drained and examined, but nothing is found inside. Search teams scour the mountainside, but find no bodies.
I find it impossible for you to be able to hide your own body. Yes, you may be able to hide one or two that you'd obviously kill, but to hide your own body would be nearly impossible.
That conclusion brings a measure of relief to the Jamisons' friends and family, who have trouble believing Sherilyn capable of murder.
I don't think there was any way, even if Sherilyn was depressed, that she would shoot Bobby. I know they had a lot of arguments and they had fights about things, but she truly loved Bobby and Bobby loved her.
To help spread the word about the Jamisons, missing posters are created and distributed around southeastern Oklahoma.
There was effort made to get information out to the public and to let them know that they were missing.
We took the picture of Madison off of their cell phone that they had taken up on the mountain. We put her age, height, her hair, date of birth. We used the driver's license of Sherilyn and Bobby, and we done the same for them.
So anybody that walked by, you could see, hey, you know, I didn't know them, or, you know, I saw them the other day.
Although their focus shifts away from murder-suicide, investigators continue to uncover strange details about the Jamisons' lives. They discover that Bobby, and especially Sherilyn, had a strong interest in spirituality.
Sherilyn had some beliefs that were not commonly shared with other people, and I think she had a tendency to exaggerate them and go a little bit overboard with them.
In the weeks prior to their disappearance, the Jamisons attended prayer meetings conducted by a local preacher, who was later interviewed by investigators.
He was talking about them seeing spirits, that they came to him and was talking to him about seeing spirits.
The preacher tells investigators that Sherilyn said that angels were coming into their home in the form of children and interacting with her 6-year-old daughter.
I know that Sherilyn had said that Madison was talking to people that had died, and one of them was named Emily. I don't think it was someone dead. I think it was an imaginary being that she, you know, had, you know, to cope with some of the things that were going on in her life. You know, it's very hard for a small child to be somewhere where there's arguments going on.
The preacher also tells police that Bobby Jamison believed that he saw spirits on the roof of their lakeside Eufaula home. It's a disturbing revelation.
It was 3 or 4 spirits that were giving them trouble and mostly talking about them being on the roof. We had also found out from him that Bobby had asked him, okay, is there a special bullet that I can buy to kill these spirits?
That makes me sad. I mean, I don't even know. I don't even know what that would be about.
Friends and family are not clear on what Bobby may have been going through to explain such unusual behavior.
It's a mystery to me. I don't know where that came from, you know, and I don't know the minister, I don't know the church, I've never been there before. It just doesn't sound like him to say something like that.
According to police, Sherilyn had also spray-painted odd phrases on signs and buildings in their neighborhood, including the storage container they had sitting on their lakefront property.
Sherilyn had a cat that had passed away, and she believed that it had been poisoned, and that raised a lot of issues within the neighborhood.
The graffiti said something along the lines of witches don't like their cats being killed.
I know she's told the neighbors around here she's a witch, and come on in for some witch's brew, and I think it scared people off, but I think she just didn't want to be bothered by people.
Sherilyn used to tell me If you have a problem with somebody, make them think you're crazy. The crazier they think you are, the more they'll leave you alone. It's true, it worked. You spray paint some crazy stuff on there and people think you are crazy. I don't think anybody bothered them after that.
For investigators, the clues and odd revelations about the Jamisons' lives are not adding up to a coherent whole.
When you do an investigation, one of the ways that most of us were taught, you actually get rid of each scenario that could have happened. So a process of elimination on it. And in this case, we haven't been able to completely eliminate anything.
This has been a very bizarre thing. I mean, there are so many pieces to this puzzle, and every day you find a new piece, something else comes up.
After the Jamisons have been missing for 7 days, a lead finally surfaces that appears to turn the investigation around. Law enforcement learns that the Jamison home is outfitted with surveillance cameras and that recordings were made up to the time of the family's disappearance.
Both cameras were pointed toward the driveway of the residence. We have the footage of their home surveillance that morning of them getting ready and preparing to come up to the mountain.
In the eerie-looking surveillance video recorded on the day they disappeared, the Jamisons are seen packing their truck.
The family was found going in and out of the home multiple times, back and forth to the car in somewhat of a trance-like state.
We found it odd that they had to go back and forth so many times. I would say safely each one of them, without it being an exaggeration, went 20 times back and forth. They never acknowledged each other as they were walking back and forth from the vehicle. Never acknowledged each other. It's like they were the only persons in the world.
Speculating that the Jamisons' behavior may indicate an involvement with drugs, Sheriff Beecham shows the recording to experts.
I actually had psychologists look at the footage of them leaving their house from their security cameras, trying to get an idea of what type of people they thought they were. It made me and the psychologists feel that they were on some type of drug at that time.
If the Jamisons were involved with drugs, in Latimer County, that usually means one thing.
We automatically assume here in southeastern Oklahoma, if you're on a drug, that it's methamphetamine because we have such a problem with it here.
Coming up, could a violent incident a month before the Jamisons disappeared be the key to solving the case?
Then she put the gun to his head and said, "You need to go. You need to leave right now and don't come back."
14 days. But now, a recovered surveillance video leads investigators to suspect a drug connection in their disappearance.
We felt that there was a possibility that Sherilyn and Bobby had been doing methamphetamines or other drugs by their behaviors on the video surveillance.
It can come in a powder form. It can come in a crystal form. They like to call it the redneck cocaine.
Some sort of drug connection could possibly help explain the bank bag with $32,000 found in the Jamisons' truck.
In this area, you find that much money, automatically you start to think about drugs.
But the Jamisons' friends and family believe that connecting them to illicit drug use is both wrong and unfair.
I don't know anything about having drugs or any of that. People jump to conclusions. They don't know what's happening.
I feel like a lot of the things that could be helpful in this case are almost being used to make them seem like druggies or whatever, and they weren't. They weren't at all. Everyone is speculating as to what were they really doing up there. Well, they were looking at land. It doesn't mean that they were up to no good.
Family members can also explain the seemingly suspicious array of surveillance cameras on the house. Bobby's mother says they had nothing to do with drugs. The cameras were installed for personal reasons, involving her now deceased husband.
Surveillance cameras put on the house for protection. My husband had threatened me several different times. He also threatened my son and Sherilyn. And I had the cameras installed. I'm the one that did that. I also had a security system put on my house because I was afraid. And it's hard to live through life being afraid.
FBI agents conduct a thorough search of the Jamisons' house and property.
There were no traces of methamphetamine in the home or in the vehicle.
As far as I know, the FBI did not find any drugs.
Investigators are unable to make a clear connection between the Jamisons' disappearance and drugs. But delving deeper into their personal lives, police uncover information that could explain some of Sherilyn's apparently erratic behavior.
After meeting with Sherilyn's mental health provider, we learned that she suffered from bipolar disorder and that she had been struggling for many years with the condition.
According to friends and family, Sherilyn didn't always stay on her prescribed medication.
It's a hard thing to accept that you have to take medication to be normal the rest of your life. She would do what a lot of depressed people do when you start feeling good because of the medication. You're like, oh, I'm good now. And you get off the medication and then you're worse off because your brain's trying to catch up.
I mean, she was like two different people. When she was taking her meds and taking them properly, she would be the happiest person on earth.
Sherilyn's condition could explain some of the more unusual writings in her journal, including the hostile letter written to her husband that police found in the Jamisons' truck.
When she would go in the other state of her bipolarism, she would be angry, hateful, belittling herself.
Sherilyn didn't write a word unless she was writing what was going on in her head. And that's why the journal was so disturbed.
Despite Sherilyn's sometimes erratic behavior, investigators believe that her bipolar disorder played no part in the family's disappearance. According to friends and family, her illness and Bobby's chronic pain did create enormous tensions in their marriage. But they looked at moving to Panola Mountain as a second chance at happiness.
They were trying to make a go of it. They were trying to get back together. And I think they thought if they moved up there, they could, just start a new life. My son loved her very, very much, as well as he did his daughter, and she loved them back.
By November 1st, the family has been missing for more than 3 weeks. Investigators are stumped.
Most investigators would love to have the amount of evidence that we have. And the problem is that it leads us in every which direction.
Then, just when they are running out of angles, a stunning new lead surfaces. Police learn that a few months before they disappeared, Bobby and Sherilyn took in a boarder.
There was an individual that was living with them, and this individual was there to help work on the residents.
Because of his chronic back pain, Bobby thought having another set of hands around would ease the burden on both him and Sherilyn. But according to friends, the boarder began to make Sherilyn uncomfortable when Bobby wasn't around.
Sherilyn and Madison both felt very threatened by this fellow who had been staying with them.
Investigators learn of one incident that was especially disturbing to Sherilyn.
Bobby had left to go somewhere, and the man that was staying here sat down next to her real close and put his face right in her face and said, I'm a white supremacist, and you keep talking about all this Indian blood you have. And I think anybody who's not pure white needs to die.
Sherilyn takes Madison away and returns with one of Bobby's guns.
She was scared for her child, and Bobby. And she pointed the gun at the guy and said, get off this property and don't come back.
Sherilyn fires live rounds near the boarder's feet to drive him away.
She's really torn up about that. She felt really bad about it. I mean, she was crying to me, telling me this and saying, I've never held a gun to anyone before.
Investigators learn that the man has an extensive police record.
Obviously, this person became a great interest to us.
If you threaten someone and then they make you leave at gunpoint, that's a pretty big indicator that you might be wanting to retaliate.
The FBI launches an investigation to identify and track down the former boarder.
The FBI felt that he quite possibly could have brought them harm.
Coming up, investigators zero in on the Jamisons' boarder. What does he know about their disappearance?
This isn't a random crime. This is something that was premeditated. Somebody knew they were going to be there that day, and they took advantage of that.
And their daughter Madison have been missing for 3 weeks. But the investigation into their disappearance is finally working with a solid lead. Police learn that a month before they disappeared, a live-in handyman allegedly threatened Sherilyn's life. She forced him to leave their home at gunpoint. His current whereabouts are unknown.
We found out all the information we needed about the individual.
Investigators learned the boarder's name from a prescription bottle found in the Jamisons' truck.
We put it out to the U.S. Marshals.
U.S. Marshals find the man living in Wilburton, Oklahoma, and detain him.
U.S. Marshals tracked him down, and the FBI did interview him.
In the interview, the former boarder is able to account for his time during the Jamisons' disappearance. The FBI doesn't consider him to be a suspect. Investigators again find themselves back at square one.
I really don't know where to go from here other than each time that we get a lead, follow up on the lead.
Friends and family believe that despite the crushing challenges in their lives, the Jamisons were planning for a brighter future until something or someone got in their way.
They were trying to love each other the best they could, you know? But knowing all of that now, it really makes me sad because they didn't get that chance to start over fresh.
Over the weeks and months that follow, investigators check out each and every lead that comes their way.
There's a rumor of them being in trouble with, whether it be organized crime or just small-time gangs or crimes. That is all rumor. And we don't know any of that for a fact. But we can't get rid of that. So it's still there.
But the rumors don't lead to a break in the case. The FBI doesn't currently consider anyone to be a suspect in the Jamisons' disappearance.
At this time, we have no suspects. And until evidence comes to life to show differently, there are no suspects.
Sheriff Beecham believes it's probable that the Jamisons were kidnapped or taken by force. He just doesn't have the evidence to prove it.
Because of everything being left in there and the way the vehicle was parked, they got out of that vehicle after they were trying to leave the location because somebody had drove up there. Somebody had drove up there and blocked their path.
It's so rural up there that you wouldn't just cross paths. This isn't a random crime. This is something that was premeditated. Somebody knew they were going to be there that day, and they took advantage of that.
Whether they made them leave by gunpoint, force, or they got in voluntarily, I don't know. And what happened from there, I don't know. But that is my current theory on what had happened.
Both family and investigators are frustrated by the magnitude of the mystery surrounding the Jamisons.
Most of the time people will tell you, and I hate saying it, but you need to find bodies. Whether alive or dead, to usually solve a case like this, you need the bodies.
Right now, we just need everyone's help in finding them and locating them because not knowing is very hard.
I've used more resources than most people have ever used in the state of Oklahoma to try to find somebody. It's a small department. It's a small county. There's not very many people around here. Everybody talks about it now. Every day I hear, did you find that missing family yet? Did you find them? And no. That's my only answer. You know, it messes with your confidence. There's no doubt. Not being able to solve such an important case.
Perhaps due to the lack of new leads, media interest in the Jamisons' disappearance outside of Latimer County has slowed to a trickle.
Even right now, whenever I ask someone if they know about this family, a whole family that went missing, they have no idea what I'm talking about.
In the meantime, Bobby, Sherilyn, and Madison's family remains desperate for answers.
It's hard to put yourself in the family's shoes. I've never had this happen to me, and I couldn't imagine it happening to me. And it must be the toughest thing you could probably go through in a lifetime.
We've already had 7 months go by. The search has gotten kind of cold. I've gone through so many scenarios in my head. If they can help me find my kids, I'll do anything. I want my kids back.
To help the case, if anybody does know any information, they need to give us a ring. We need it. We're begging for it. If you know where they're at, tell us.
You know, I would